is Janelle Sambo, and as always happens when you have to give a presentation, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so if my voice cuts out, that's probably why. But today I want to talk to you about a really, really interesting topic, and that's where did language come from? And the reason why this is interesting to me is because it's really a marriage of two fields. That's a study of linguistics, which is the scientific study of language, and also of communication studies. So basically what I'd like to do is talk about this from both perspectives, applying some critical theories from each, and bring it all together to just open the discussion to a really complex issue. So basically what that means is, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what is language, just so we're all on the same page. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about what communication studies can tell us about this big topic. And I'd like to say right off the bat, too, I have tons of slides, but I would be happy to sacrifice one or two of them if someone wants to chime in or give your opinion or call me on something or just tell me I'm ridiculous. So please feel free to raise your hand and contradict me, agree with me, anything at any point in time. So what is language? Well, one really good place to start is with Charles Hockett's Design Features of Language. And this is actually a really fun activity. If you ever go out and pick some kind of animal communication, say, like whale song or a bee dance or anything like that, go through these design features and see if you can apply them to that mode of communication. If you can, maybe you have a case to say that this is actually language and not just some really intelligent animal. Some of the ones that will be relevant to this discussion are the ones listed here. So the mode of communication at its most basic form is using the vocal anatomy to produce speech. Rapid fading is exactly what we've been talking about in class, where once you speak something, it's gone. Once you sign something, it's gone. And you need to both send and receive the message before it disappears. Discreteness is really interesting because it's like that Gutenberg press with all of the moving pieces that can be recombined. It means that language can be broken down into tons of little units that can be recombined into a million different ways. So sounds combined into words, words combined into sentences, things like that. Reflexiveness is exactly what I'm doing right now. It's using language to talk about language in any capacity. So if your dog can do that, maybe he has language. If not, I don't think you have a case. And then learnability and then cultural transmission kind of go together. It means all of you at some point managed to learn language, and on top of that, it came from this really interesting dynamic of learning it from other people in a social context. So we can summarize that to mean that language is not spoken, signed, written, or thought. That might seem counterintuitive, but what it really is the ability to combine all of these design features. It's that mental representation inside your mind. And even more specifically, it's not languages, it's not French, it's not English, it's not Spanish, it's not anything we can name like that, but it's language with a capital L. That set of mental representations, those things we can apply the design features of language to, and that's what I'll be referring to when I talk about language in my presentation. So just a show of hands, has anyone heard of Noam Chomsky? I'm hoping like everybody. He has written and discussed so many different issues in so many different fields. Anyone read anything about his from political science? Anyone? Probably a few people. What about like philosophy? Anybody? He's done some philosophy, okay. All sorts of things. He's written on so many things, really smart guy. But the thing is, he's actually a linguist. This is where he started out, and this is where he does most of his writings. And for the field of linguistics, he's done something really interesting, and that's proposing this idea of generative grammar. And basically what that means is that language is a biological organ. So I had it described to me like you could say, I have 2 lungs, I have a kidney, I have a brain, and then I have language. And it's an organ. It's in my DNA. It's something I'm born with. So if we say that this is what language is, there are some interesting implications. First of these is that all languages are equal. If you're born with it, well then, who are we to say which one's better? And I like that because there's nothing more sophisticated about Spanish over French, or there's nothing more prestigious about German over English, or anything like that. We say they're all equal, they just sound a little bit different. He also says that every normal human has the same access to language. Again, a very provocative idea. Because what this means is, for example, everybody's born with a heart. Someone might be born with a heart defect. That doesn't stop it from being true that all people are born with a heart, all normal people. In the same way, language is something everyone's born with. You might be born with a speech disorder or something like that, but everyone is born with this organ. And finally, it kind of implies that language may have evolved before it was used, right? So at the same time as our lungs are getting bigger so that we have more capacity to breathe and run and things like that, at the same time as our larynx is lowering so that we can start to move our tongue, with more control. Language is evolving so that we can start to use it as a social tool. So, show of hands, does anyone think this is a good idea of what language is? Hands up. Okay, glad to see at least some of you are awake. Cool. Anyone think this is a bad idea? This doesn't explain language? Not a single person? Perfect. Okay, because this is my party, I'm going to tell you my opinion. I basically like this. All languages are equal. I'm okay with that. I think we like equality, right? People are okay? Say no, really? I might have to talk after this. Okay, this one though, every normal human has the same access to language. This doesn't resonate right with me. I don't like it. I'm going to get into why. Same thing with this one. Language may have evolved before it was used. It was a biological accident, hey? I'm not really sure what I think about that. So let's look at a different point of view. And that comes from Julie Sedvey, and we actually heard her name earlier in the presentations. Do you mind holding up Language and Advertising? That one? That's her book. It's sold on language. And Julie is a professor here at the university. She teaches in psychology and linguistics, and I actually got to interview her for this. While taking one of her courses, she presented this idea that maybe language wasn't really just a biological accident, but maybe we took some agency in it. Okay, so maybe language is a little bit more of a cultural tool, something we use. And this has some implications. Again, all languages are equal. I already said my opinion, I find that okay. But she has a slightly different opinion on the normal humans thing. And she says every normal human only has as much access to language as they have the skill to use it. And she words this really nicely, so I'll let her do it.
I think everybody, who's human basically is capable of participating in the language at the level of having conversations about fairly complex things, interacting socially for a great variety of purposes. But then I think there's kind of a layer of people that I would call super communicators who manage to have really a tremendous advantage within a social context by virtue of their ability to use language exceptionally.
So basically what she's saying is everybody might be born with the ability to use language, but some people are definitely better at it. Would you guys agree? Hands up if yes? So maybe this is making a little bit more sense than Chomsky's biological organ thing. Okay. She also kind of implies that language may have been used before it was evolved. So what this means is that whole thing of agency, right? It means that we intentionally started to use language because we could use it as a cultural tool and we wanted to make use of it. And that just resonates really nicely with me. I really like that. But she wants to mention too that there are some characteristics now of language that seem really instinctual. It seems to be coded in our DNA, like how babies babble when they're young, like they're just trying to practice with language. But that doesn't mean that language didn't start out as a cultural tool and now it's just become so ingrained in our DNA that we're born with it. So that brings us to what communications can tell us. And I'm assuming that most of you have read Theory's discussion on the public sphere from Habermas and Fraser. Well, basically, this is the definition of the public sphere, a realm of our social life in which something approaching public opinion can be formed. But I'm more interested in what Nancy Fraser had to say about the public sphere in her critique on it. Where Habermas said that the public sphere should rationally discuss matters of the common good, Fraser said, well, why only discuss matters of the common good? You think about it, in our infancy humans, claws kind of suck, teeth are pretty pathetic, we're not big or strong, and we can't even hide very well because we're too big to be small. So really the only benefit we have is each other, right? So my personal interest is the community's interest. If I stay alive, I can help you stay alive. If you all stay alive, you can help me stay alive. So this makes me think, maybe language happened because we wanted to talk about personal interests. That's maybe one condition that for why we implemented language. Habermas also wanted 100% equal access in the public sphere. But as we said before, is that really possible, right? Even if it's instinctual, some people will still be able to use the tool more effectively. So maybe language happened because some people were better communicators than others. Some people were better at it, they developed new tools to be even better at communication, and these are the people who we are generations descending from. Habermas only wanted one public sphere. He didn't want many. And Fraser has an awesome discussion on this if you get a chance to reread it. But she basically says, wouldn't society benefit from multiple public spheres, right? For so many different reasons. Wish I could get into it all. But maybe this means that language happened because it was a tool that all socioeconomic classes could use. Because like we said, even though some groups might be better at using language, everybody can still start at that baseline and have pretty sophisticated conversations. finally, Habermas wanted the public sphere to be autonomous from the state, but he wanted the public sphere to also be the decision makers, but somehow that didn't make it the state. So Fraser said, but that's the definition of the state. And she uses the example of Parliament, which is kind of strange, and I agree with her critique. So that makes me think again, maybe the intersection of skilled tool usage and decision making is the state. And so those people that wanted to rise up in the social hierarchy in the beginning were the ones that wanted to be most effective with this tool called language. So when we summarize it, we basically have this interesting picture of a very early human society that relies on its peers to stay alive. And also we have some people who are better communicators than others. Some people that maybe want to rise up in the hierarchy, or some people that are just naturally predisposed to being better communicators. And all of these could potentially be conditions for language. So far, is anyone agreeing or disagreeing with my arguments? Agreeing? Disagreeing? Well, you guys are no fun. So basically what this all means is, can we ever really know? Well, I don't know. We can't really go back in time. Not yet anyway, unless Dr. Who comes and sweeps one of us away. I'm just not really sure. But I talked to Julie Sedeby, and her opinion was that when we learn a little bit more about neuroscience and how that relates to species that are closely related to us, we might have a better idea of what made us decide to use language. So I just want to leave you guys with a little tidbit. And that's, remember how changes in communications technology change the way we see the world? Well, what if changes in how we see the world change communications technology? So, for example, our social conditions are changing, and that's why we decided to invent, with agency, the use of language. And even more provocative, if we've gone this far in a very short period of time, it makes me wonder where language will take us next. Thank you.